I still remember the exact moment the dream took root inside me. I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, sitting on the narrow windowsill of our family's two-bedroom apartment, knees pulled up to my chest, staring down at the street below. The building was old, the paint peeling in long strips, the hallway always smelling faintly of someone else's cooking. My parents argued a lot back then, money mostly, and I would press my forehead against the cool glass and imagine a different life. A place that was quiet, a place that was mine, a place where no one could take anything away from me just because they needed it more. That image never left me. It grew up with me, became sharper and more insistent as I got older. By the time I graduated college and started my first real job as a junior software developer, the dream had a name: my own home. Not an apartment I rented month to month, not a shared space with roommates who never cleaned up after themselves, but a real home: 3 bedrooms, good light, a balcony where I could drink coffee in the mornings and feel like the world wasn't pressing in on me. I knew it wouldn't come easy. I had no rich parents, no trust fund, no generous relatives waiting to co-sign a loan. What I had was time, stubbornness, and a willingness to live smaller than anyone around me thought was reasonable. For 7 years, I treated every dollar like it was a soldier in an army I was building. I worked 60 hours a week at my day job, sometimes 70 when a deadline loomed, and then I freelanced on nights and weekends. Bug fixes for small startups, building simple websites for local businesses, anything that paid. I tracked every cent in a spreadsheet that lived on my phone. Income in one column, expenses in another, savings goal glowing red at the bottom like a beacon. My lifestyle became almost monastic. I ate the same rotation of cheap filling meals: rice and beans with whatever vegetables were on sale, eggs when I could get them for under $2 a dozen, oats for breakfast every single day. I drank tap water or the cheapest coffee I could brew at home. I wore the same 5 or 6 outfits on rotation until the seams literally gave out. Then I'd patch them or turn them into rags. Vacations. I didn't even let myself daydream about them. Restaurants were for other people, movies in theatres, new books in hardcover, concert tickets. Those were luxuries I mentally filed under someday, maybe after the mortgage is paid. People noticed. Friends stopped inviting me out as often because I always said no. Family members rolled their eyes and called me cheap or obsessed. Co-workers teased me about my packed lunches while they ordered delivery. I smiled through it, shrugged, said I was saving for something big. I never told them how many nights I cried myself to sleep from sheer bone-deep tiredness. How many times I sat on the floor of my tiny rented studio wondering if I would ever make it, if the numbers would ever add up, if I was crazy for thinking one person could do this alone. But I kept going. I kept going because every time I transferred another paycheck into that high-yield savings account, I could feel the dream getting closer. Every skipped happy hour, every repaired pair of shoes, every weekend spent coding instead of partying, it was all fuel. I visualized the keys in my hand, the way athletes visualize crossing the finish line. I walked past that particular building in my neighborhood hundreds of times, slowing down to study the windows, the balcony railings, the way the afternoon light hit the bricks. I told myself, one day, soon. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon in early spring, the day arrived. I sat across from the escrow officer in a small fluorescent-lit office that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I signed every page they slid in front of me: the deed, the mortgage documents, the title transfer. When it was done, the realtor handed me the keys, 2 small silver ones on a plain plastic fob, and smiled like it was just another closing. But for me, it wasn't. I drove straight to the building. I parked in my assigned spot for the first time. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor. I stood in front of Unit 412, slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened. The apartment was completely empty. Bare walls, naked hardwood floors, sunlight streaming in through windows I had chosen from the floor plans months earlier. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, leaned back against it, and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. And then I cried. Not the quiet, exhausted tears I'd cried so many nights before. These were different, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I didn't even know existed. Relief, pride, grief for all the years I'd carried alone, joy so sharp it almost hurt. I stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, I stood up and walked through the space slowly, room by room. The living room with its big windows that faced east, perfect for morning light. The kitchen with the little island I'd always wanted. The balcony where I could already picture a single chair, a small table, a mug of coffee steaming in the cool air. And the 2 spare bedrooms, blank canvases waiting for me to decide what they would become. One would be my home office, dual monitors, ergonomic chair, shelves full of coding books and reference manuals. The other, maybe a library someday, or a guest room for the rare friend who truly understood boundaries. Or maybe just quiet space that belonged only to me. I opened the sliding door to the balcony and stepped out. The city hummed below me, cars, distant voices, the faint rumble of a train. But up here, it felt far away, peaceful. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered to the empty air. I did it. No one else had to hear it. I didn't need applause or validation. I had the keys in my pocket, the mortgage in my name, the proof etched into every aching muscle and every skipped pleasure of the last 7 years. This home wasn't just walls and a roof. It was independence. It was safety. It was the first thing in my life that no one could ever take away from me, because I had built it, piece by painful piece, with nothing but my own hands and my own refusal to give up. That day, standing alone on my balcony with tears drying on my cheeks and the future stretching out in front of me, I finally understood what victory felt like. It felt like freedom, and it was all mine. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern much earlier. I should never have let myself hope, even for a second, that my family would be genuinely happy for me when I finally achieved something big. Deep down, I already knew. In their eyes, my money had never really belonged to me. It was a shared resource, a communal pot that existed to serve whoever shouted the loudest or had the most socially acceptable need at the moment. My paycheck, my savings, my sacrifices, they were all just temporary holdings until someone else decided it was time to dip in. The wedding was the moment the mask finally slipped off completely. Evan and Sienna had been dating for a couple of years when they announced their engagement. From the very first phone call, it was clear they weren't planning a small, intimate ceremony. They wanted the full fantasy, a waterfront venue with a view of the bay, 500 guests minimum, an open bar flowing all night, a live band instead of a playlist, a designer gown imported from somewhere in Europe, custom floral arches, professional photographers, videographers, the works. The estimated cost kept climbing every time they talked about it, first $80,000, then $100,000, then closer to $120,000, when Sienna decided the original venue wasn't quite right. Evan and Sienna both worked decent jobs, but nothing that could cover an event like that without massive debt or help. So, naturally, the family turned to me. It happened during one of those group video calls my mother loved to organize on Sunday evenings. Everyone was on screen: Mom, Evan, Sienna, a couple of aunts who always chimed in. They were all smiles at first, talking about colors and centerpieces. Then my mother cleared her throat and looked straight into the camera at me. "Maya," she said, voice sweet but firm, the way she always sounded when she was about to deliver bad news, disguised as kindness. "You're doing really well now. You've got that good job. You've been saving like crazy. We all know you've got money put away. Evan and Sienna need $40,000 to make this wedding what they've dreamed of. It's what family does. We help each other when it matters most." Evan nodded solemnly, like this was a foregone conclusion. Sienna gave a small, hopeful smile and added, It would mean the world to us, Maya. We want it to be perfect. No one asked how many extra hours I'd worked to build that savings. No one mentioned that I was still years away from my own goal, the down payment on a place of my own. No one even pretended this was a request instead of a demand. It was presented as my duty, my obligation, my role in the family script. I sat there staring at my screen, heart pounding. $40,000. That number represented almost 2 full years of the brutal schedule I'd kept. 60-plus-hour weeks, skipped meals, nights coding until my eyes burned, every unnecessary expense slashed to nothing. It was the difference between owning my future and starting over from zero. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. I took a breath and said, as calmly as I could, I can't give $40,000. That would wipe out everything I've saved, but I can give $10,000. That's the absolute most I can do without ruining my own plans. I transferred the money the next day, $10,000 I had earned through sweat and sleepless nights, and sent a polite message explaining again why that was my limit. The reaction was immediate, brutal, and coordinated. My phone lit up with messages before I even closed the banking app. Mum, how could you do this to your brother after everything we've done for you? Evan, you just embarrassed me in front of Sienna's entire family. Thanks a lot, sis. Sienna, in a group chat I was still in at the time, I guess some people care more about their bank account than family. Aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months flooded my inbox with lectures. Selfish. Ungrateful. You've always been so focused on yourself. Real family helps when it counts. One relative even sent me a long voice note crying about how I had ruined the most important day of Evan's life and how I should be ashamed. They turned the narrative overnight. I wasn't the sister who had just given 10 grand out of hard-earned savings. I was the cold, heartless one who refused to pitch in for something beautiful. They never acknowledged the years I'd already helped in smaller ways, covering phone bills when someone forgot, sending money for car repairs, buying groceries during lean months. None of that mattered. The moment I set a boundary on the big ask, I became the villain. That wedding wasn't the first time they treated my money like public property. It was just the loudest. There had been smaller incidents stretching back years. Loans I gave Evan that were never repaid. It's family, Maya, don't make it weird. Emergency funds I fronted for my mother's car repairs, or medical copays that somehow never got reimbursed. Guilt trips every time I said no to yet another request because you're doing so well you can afford it. Whenever I tried to prioritize my own savings, the script was the same. Tears, accusations, reminders of how much they had sacrificed for me growing up, even though I'd been working since high school to help with bills. I learned the lesson early and painfully. In their world, my success wasn't mine to keep. It existed to be redistributed. My discipline was something to exploit, not admire. My boundaries were acts of betrayal, and the second I protected what I had fought so hard to build, the warmth vanished. The love I thought was unconditional turned out to be transactional. By the time I finally bought my apartment, I already carried the scars of that truth. I knew better than to expect celebration. I knew what would come next if they ever found out. And I was right. When the moving truck pulled away and the last box was carried upstairs, I locked the door, leaned against it, and made a promise to myself. No one in my family would know about this place. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I knew them too well. I had memorized the script they always used the moment they sensed I had something they wanted. It would start innocently enough. A casual phone call. Hey, how's life? By the way, Evan and Sienna are looking for a bigger place. Then the hints would get heavier. Mum's medical bills came in again, nothing crazy, but if you could just help a little. Within weeks, it would escalate to outright demands. You have 3 bedrooms and you're single? That's wasteful. We're family shares. I could already hear Sienna's voice, sweet as poison. Just let us stay for a few months until we get on our feet. You won't even notice us." I could picture my mother crying on the phone about how I was abandoning them in their time of need, how I had so much while they had so little. I had lived that cycle before. I knew exactly how it ended, with me giving until I was hollow and them still calling me selfish for not giving more. So I chose silence. Complete, airtight silence. I never changed my address on any official documents that might accidentally reach them. I kept getting mail at my old P.O. box. When my mother asked where I was living now, I said, "Oh, just a nicer rental in the same neighborhood, nothing special." When Evan texted asking for my new address for the Christmas card list, I replied with a vague, "I'll send you photos when I'm settled," and then never did. On social media, I became a ghost. No stories of moving boxes, no proud key-in-hand photo, no new chapter captions. My profile stayed frozen in time, old photos from years ago, nothing that hinted at change. When co-workers at the office asked where I'd moved, I smiled and said, "Still in the east side. Found a quiet spot, eh?" I kept driving the same 8-year-old Honda with the dent in the fender. I wore the same modest clothes, carried the same worn-out tote bag. I became an expert at deflection, changing the subject, laughing it off, giving just enough truth to avoid suspicion, but never enough to invite questions. The secrecy wasn't easy. There were moments when it hurt like a bruise I kept pressing on. I wanted to tell someone who would understand what this meant to me. I wanted to scream from the balcony that I had done it, alone, after 7 years of saying no to everything else, after nights when I wasn't sure I could keep going. I wanted my mother to walk through these rooms and see the life I had built with my own hands. I wanted, for one stupid second, to believe she might actually be proud, but I knew better. I had already given them $10,000 for a wedding and been called stingy. I had already paid for car repairs, phone bills, emergency rent, birthdays, graduations, always quietly, always without thanks. I knew that the moment they saw these walls, this balcony, these empty bedrooms waiting for my future and mine alone, their love would curdle into resentment again. The narrative would shift in an instant. How dare I have this while they struggled? How dare I keep it to myself? So I protected it the only way I knew how, by hiding it. For the first few months, the apartment was my secret universe. I painted the walls myself on weekends. Soft sage green in the living room, warm cream in the bedroom, a bold navy accent wall in the office to be. I assembled bookshelves with my own shaking hands and filled them slowly, one precious volume at a time. I bought a tiny bistro table for the balcony and sat there every morning with coffee, watching the sun rise over the rooftops, feeling something I had never felt before. Safety. True, impenetrable safety. No one could barge in here. No one could guilt me out of it. No one could demand I share what I had bled for. At night, I walked from room to room barefoot, trailing my fingers along the walls, whispering to the empty air like it could hear me. This is mine, all mine. I earned this. But even in those perfect, quiet moments, a small knot of dread lived in my stomach. Because I knew this couldn't last forever. Secrets this big have weight. They press against the seams of everyday life until something finally gives. One day, someone would notice a piece of mail, or I'd slip in conversation. Or they'd decide to surprise me and track me down. And when that day came, the reaction wouldn't be joy or pride or even mild happiness for me. It would be entitlement. It would be anger. It would be war. I just didn't know yet how ugly that war would get. Part 4. The dinner that turned into a nightmare. After months of holding my breath every time the phone rang or a text notification lit up my screen, I made a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. I invited them over. I told myself it was the right thing to do, mature, adult. If I was going to draw a permanent line in the sand eventually, maybe I could do it with dignity. Face to face, in my own home, with homemade food on the table and no excuses left. Maybe, just maybe, seeing the place in person would make them understand what it represented. Maybe they would look around at the quiet rooms, the sunlight on the hardwood, the balcony I had fought 7 years to earn, and feel something close to pride instead of resentment. Maybe they would finally see me, not as a walking ATM, but as their daughter, their sister, who had built something real from nothing. So I sent the invitation. A simple group text. I'd like to have you all over for dinner next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just homemade food and a chance to catch up. 6 p.m. at my place. I included the address I had kept hidden for so long. I spent the whole week preparing, grocery shopping on my lunch break, cooking a big pot of lasagna from scratch, baking garlic bread, tossing a salad, even buying a bottle of inexpensive red wine I thought might soften the edges. I cleaned until the apartment smelled like lemon and possibility. I set the table with mismatched plates I actually liked, lit a couple of candles, put on soft music. I wanted it to feel warm, welcoming, like a beginning instead of an ending. They arrived right on time, my mother first, arms full of a store-bought cake she insisted on bringing, so you don't have to do everything. Then Evan and Sienna hand in hand, smiling like nothing had ever been wrong between us. My aunt and uncle tagged along too, uninvited but acting like they belonged. I opened the door and let them in, heart hammering so hard I thought they could hear it. They walked through the apartment slowly, like tourists in a museum. "Nice light," my mother said, running her fingers along the windowsill. "Good size," Evan muttered, peering into the spare bedrooms. Sienna lingered on the balcony, one hand resting lightly on the railing, the other on her stomach in a way I didn't register as significant yet. They made polite comments. "Cozy? You've done well for yourself. This must have been expensive." But the compliments felt thin, like they were reading from a script they didn't quite believe. We sat down to eat. The lasagna was hot, the conversation careful. I waited until dessert, chocolate cake sliced and passed around, before I said it out loud. "I wanted you all here tonight because I bought this place. It's mine. I saved for 7 years, worked every extra hour I could, and last month I closed. This is my home." For a heartbeat, the room was quiet. Then the joy erupted, but not for me. Sienna stood up first. She placed both hands gently on her belly, eyes already glistening with what looked like tears, but felt calculated. "I have something to share too," she said, voice soft and trembling just enough to command attention. "Evan and I are expecting. I'm pregnant." The room exploded. My mother gasped and clapped her hands over her mouth. Evan beamed like he'd won something. Hugs were exchanged. Congratulations rained down. I stood up too, walked over and hugged Sienna. I meant it. Whatever else had happened between us, a baby deserved to be celebrated. "I'm really happy for you," I told her, and at that moment, I was. But she didn't let go of the hug right away. When she pulled back, her eyes locked on mine, wet and shining in a way that made my skin prickle. "This house," she said, sweeping her arm around the room like she was appraising real estate, "is perfect for a baby. 3 bedrooms, all this space, a balcony with fresh air. You don't need 3 bedrooms all to yourself, Maya. We do. The baby does." My stomach plummeted. The air in the room changed, thickened, like someone had sucked out the oxygen. I tried to laugh it off, to keep my voice steady. "Sienna, this is my home. I bought it. It took everything I had." My mother cut in immediately, voice rising with rehearsed urgency. "She's right, Maya. A baby needs stability, room to grow. You can't just sit here alone in all this space while your own niece or nephew is crammed into a tiny apartment." Evan nodded, arms crossed, looking at me like I was being unreasonable. "We're not asking you to give it away for free. We can take over the mortgage payments, or you sell it to us at what you paid. It's only fair. Family helps family." Sienna took one step closer, lowering her voice to that soft, wounded tone she knew worked so well. "I don't want to have to do this, Maya. But if I have to raise this child in stress, in a cramped one-bedroom with no sunlight, no quiet, the doctors have already warned me. High stress can cause complications. I might not be able to go through with the pregnancy. I can't risk it. She let the sentence hang unfinished, but the implication landed like a slap. I stared at her, pulse roaring in my ears. Are you seriously threatening to abort my niece or nephew if I don't hand over my house? She burst into louder sobs, burying her face in Evan's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her protectively, glaring at me over her head. You're putting her in an impossible position, Maya. She's carrying your blood. My mother started crying too, real tears mixed with performance. How can you be so cruel? After everything, she's pregnant, Maya. You're going to stress her into losing the baby. The shouting started all at once, overlapping voices, accusations flying like shrapnel. Selfish, heartless, unnatural. You always think only of yourself. What kind of aunt are you? You're choosing bricks over a child. My celebration, the one night I had dared to hope for something good, had been hijacked in under 5 minutes. They turned my home into a bargaining chip, my refusal into a death sentence. They weaponized a pregnancy, whether real or imagined, I still didn't know, and made my no sound like murder. I stood in the middle of my own living room, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me, feeling the walls close in. Get out, I said quietly. No one moved at first. Get out of my house. Evan muttered something under his breath. Sienna kept sobbing. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin and whispered, You'll regret this. They left slowly, grumbling, shaking their heads, convinced they were the victims walking away from an ungrateful tyrant. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there in the silence that followed, staring at the half-eaten cake, the scattered plates, the candles still flickering like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking, my chest hurt. They hadn't come to celebrate me, they had come to claim what I had built. And that night marked the beginning of the end, of any illusion that we could ever be family again. After that dinner, I couldn't pretend anymore. The ambush in my own living room had stripped away the last thin layer of hope I'd been clinging to, that maybe, somehow, we could still salvage something resembling family. The way they had turned my moment of pride into a negotiation table, the way Sienna had weaponized a pregnancy announcement, the chorus of accusations that followed, it all made one thing crystal clear. They didn't see me as a person with rights and dreams. They saw me as an obstacle to be removed. So I did what I should have done years earlier. I cut them off. I blocked every number. My mother's, Evan's, Sienna's, even the aunts and uncles who had always hovered on the edges of the drama. I changed my locks the very next day, using the incident as justification to upgrade to deadbolts, and a smart lock that logged every entry attempt. I stopped answering unknown calls, deleted group chats, and set my social media to private with strict filters. For the first time in my adult life, I enforced real, unbreakable boundaries. The silence that followed wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I breathed easier knowing no one could reach me unless I allowed it. A few weeks later, I decided it was time to reclaim the space they had tried to poison. I invited the people who had actually been there for me, college friends who had watched me grind through those 7 years without ever asking for a handout, co-workers who had quietly cheered my promotion, a couple of neighbors who had become real friends over time. Nothing extravagant, just good food, music, laughter, and the simple joy of sharing my home with people who respected it. The evening felt magical. The apartment came alive in a way it never had before. People wandered from room to room, admiring the bookshelves I'd built, complimenting the view from the balcony, asking genuine questions about how I'd done it all. Someone put on a playlist we all knew the words to. Someone else brought a board game. We ate, we talked, we laughed until my cheeks hurt. For once, the rooms echoed with kindness instead of conflict. Around 8:30 p.m., the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was fists hammering the door, loud enough to rattle the frame. Before I could even stand up, I heard the key turn in the lock, the old spare key my mother had kept from years ago, the one I had stupidly never asked her to return after I moved out of her place. The door flew open with such force it banged against the wall. There they were, my mother leading the charge, Evan right behind her, Sienna clutching her belly like a prop, and two uncles I barely spoke to flanking them like enforcers. The room froze. My friends stared in stunned silence. Sienna moved first. She stormed straight to the dining table, still covered with half-eaten platters, wine glasses, and dessert plates, and grabbed the edge with both hands. With one violent yank, she flipped it. Food flew everywhere. Lasagna splattered the walls, salad scattered across the floor, glasses shattered into glittering shards. Someone gasped. Someone else shouted, "What the hell?" Evan shoved past one of my friends who tried to step in front of me, hard enough to send the guy stumbling back into the couch. Then Evan turned to me, face twisted with rage, fist raised, not swinging yet, but close enough that the threat was unmistakable. "You think you can just lock us out? You think you can keep this house to yourself? You owe us this place, Maya. You owe us." Sienna started screaming over the chaos, voice cracking with theatrical hysteria. "You're killing my baby. All this stress. You're murdering my child. The doctors said it. You're going to make me lose it because you're too selfish to share." My mother collapsed onto the nearest chair, sobbing loudly, the same performative wails I'd heard 1,000 times before. "How could you do this to us? We're family. She's pregnant, Maya. You're destroying everything." The uncles tried to block the doorway, arms crossed, muttering things like, "Calm down, everyone just calm down," but making no real effort to leave or stop the destruction. My friends reacted fast. One pulled out her phone and started recording. Another was already on the line with 911, voice shaking but clear. "There are intruders in my friend's apartment. They broke in. They're destroying things. Someone threatened violence. Please hurry." People shouted at them to get out. Someone tried to herd Sienna away from the broken glass. It felt like forever, but the police arrived in 25 agonizing minutes. Two officers stepped inside, took one look at the wreckage, the overturned table, the food-smeared walls, the shattered dishes, the visibly terrified group of guests, and immediately ordered my family to leave. Evan lunged toward me again, shouting something incoherent. One officer had to physically restrain him, cuffing his hands behind his back while he kept yelling about how I deserved this. Sienna wailed the entire way down the hallway, clutching her stomach and screaming that I was a murderer. My mother's final words hissed through tears as she was escorted out. "You'll die alone in this house, Maya, and it'll be your fault." The door closed. The officers took statements, photos of the damage, copies of the security footage I'd installed after the dinner incident. They assured me trespassing, vandalism, and threats of violence were serious charges. They left with promises to follow up. The apartment was a disaster zone, food everywhere, broken glass crunching underfoot, furniture knocked askew. My friends stayed, helping clean, hugging me, one quietly calling a 24-hour locksmith to change the locks again that very night. But the real damage wasn't the mess, it was the violation. They had stormed my sanctuary, destroyed my celebration, threatened me in front of witnesses, and still left believing they were the wronged ones. That night, something inside me finally hardened into steel. No more second chances. No more hoping for change, no more guilt over protecting myself. They had crossed every line, legal, moral, emotional, and I was done letting them near me, near my home, near my peace. Ever again. 3 weeks passed in uneasy quiet. I replaced the locks again. I filed for restraining orders. I tried to rebuild the sense of safety that had been shattered. I told myself the worst was over. Then Evan showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. He didn't knock politely. He pounded like he was trying to break through. Through the peephole I saw him, red-faced, dishevelled, eyes wild. Sienna stood a step behind, pale, tears already streaming, one hand cradling her belly. "Maya! Open this fucking door! Maya!" I didn't move. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed my phone and started recording through the peephole. Evan kept screaming, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "You killed my baby! You fucking killed my child! This is on you! You did this!" The words hit like punches. I slid down the wall, legs giving out. Sienna's voice joined in, soft, broken, perfectly pitched for maximum guilt. "We lost the baby last night. I started bleeding so much. The doctors said it was the stress. Extreme, prolonged stress. They said the baby couldn't survive it. And we all know where that stress came from, don't we, Maya?" They performed for the hallway, for the neighbours peeking outdoors, for the building's security cameras. Evan slammed his palm against the door again. "You wouldn't help us. You wouldn't give us the house. You turned your back on your own family, on your own niece or nephew. You murdered my kid." Sienna pressed her forehead to the door, sobbing. "I begged you. I begged for this baby to have a safe place. I told you the stress was killing me. Now my baby is gone because of you." They stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, yelling, crying, repeating the same accusations over and over like a chant meant to brand itself into my brain. Finally, building security arrived and dragged them away. Evan's last shout echoed down the hall. "This isn't over. Everyone's going to know what you did." Within hours, the story went public. Sienna posted a long, tear-soaked message, public, visible to anyone. A black and white ultrasound photo, stock image, I later learned, a hospital wristband, probably fake or borrowed, paragraphs of carefully crafted grief. "I lost my baby yesterday. The doctors said prolonged emotional distress and lack of support were major factors. I begged family for help, a safe home for my child, and was turned away. I was told my baby wasn't worth it. Now I live with this pain forever. Some people choose property over people, some choose themselves over innocent life." Comments poured in. Sympathy for Sienna, fury at the unnamed, selfish relative, prayers, outrage. Family members shared it without hesitation. Distant cousins, old acquaintances, even people I barely knew tagged me or messaged me privately. "How could you? You're disgusting. Murderer." The internet exploded. Hashtags appeared. Strangers called me heartless, baby killer, monster. The narrative locked in overnight. I had caused a miscarriage through my greed and refusal to hand over my apartment. For days, weeks, I barely slept. I reread the posts obsessively. I replayed Evan's screams. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I had contributed to something horrific. Had my boundaries pushed her over an edge? Had my no really cost a life? The guilt was suffocating, heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I felt poisoned by it, by the hate, by the doubt, by the fear that perhaps they were right. I almost broke, almost. But deep down, a small, stubborn voice kept whispering, "Wait, something doesn't add up." And thank God it did. Because the truth, the real ugly truth, was about to surface, and it would change everything. I was still drowning in the aftermath of the miscarriage accusation when Chloe showed up at my door one rainy Thursday afternoon. She didn't call ahead, she just knocked, 3 sharp raps, and when I opened the door, she was standing there soaked, laptop clutched under her arm like a shield, eyes fierce with something between fury and triumph. "I've got it," she said. "The proof, all of it. You need to see this right now." We sat on my couch. She opened her laptop, pulled up a folder labelled simply Sienna, and started scrolling. The messages were screenshots, hundreds of them, pulled from a months-long private thread between Sienna and her best friend Tara. Chloe had gotten them through a mutual acquaintance who had finally grown sick of the lies and quietly forwarded everything. The first messages dated back almost 8 months. long before the dinner announcement. Sienna, to Tara. Evan's sister just bought that 3-bed place. She's sitting on a goldmine and won't share a cent. Time to force her hand. Tara. How? You can't just demand it. Sienna. Pregnancy. Everyone loses their mind over a baby. I'll say I'm 8 weeks when I drop the bomb. Fake the symptoms. Nausea, fatigue, cravings. Buy a digital test online. Snap a pic of 2 lines. Easy. They'll melt. Weeks later, right after the dinner, Sienna. Told them tonight at her stupid new house. Dropped the pregnancy news. You should have seen Maya's face. She went white. She's cracking. One more push and she'll hand it over. Tara. And if she still says no? Sienna. Then we go full nuclear. Fake miscarriage. Blame the stress she caused by being a selfish bitch. Post it everywhere. Ultrasound from Google Images. Fake hospital band. Tearful caption. The internet will destroy her for me. She'll cave or she'll be ruined forever. There were drafts of the social media post, timelines for when to start bleeding, instructions on buying fake blood online, laughing emojis when I blocked their numbers, strategy sessions about which hashtags would get the most traction. Justice for the baby and family first, selfish sister. And the worst part, the part that made my hands shake as I read, messages where Sienna laughed about how easy it was to manipulate Evan and my mother. They're so predictable. Just cry a little and they'll believe anything. Maya's the only one who ever says no, so she's the perfect villain. I sat there for a long time after Chloe finished scrolling. The rage wasn't hot and explosive like I expected. It was cold, white, blinding, like staring into the sun. They hadn't lost a baby. There had never been a baby. They had invented an entire tragedy, complete with grief, ultrasounds, hospital drama, just to break me. To make me doubt myself so deeply, I might hand over the one thing I had left. Chloe watched me carefully. What are you going to do? I closed the laptop. I'm going to show them, all of them. 2 days later, I rented a small conference room at a co-working space downtown. Neutral territory, security cameras in every corner, no risk of another home invasion. I sent one group message to the core players, my mother, Evan, Sienna. We need to talk, in person. Saturday at 2 p.m. address. This is the only chance for closure. Come or don't. Your choice. They came, all of them. They walked in looking smug, probably thinking I was finally ready to apologize or negotiate. They sat down around the long table. I stood at the front, Chloe beside me like silent backup. A projector screen was already set up. I didn't greet them. I didn't sit. I just hit play. The screenshots appeared one by one, enlarged, crystal clear. Every damning word, every plan, every laugh, every lie. The room went deathly quiet. Sienna's face drained of colour. She tried to speak first. That's fake. She photoshopped it. Maya's lying. Her voice cracked. She looked at Evan, eyes wide with panic. Evan stared at the screen, then slowly turned to his wife. Is this real? His voice was barely a whisper. You planned this, the whole thing. There was no baby? Sienna started stammering. I was venting. I didn't mean I was desperate, okay? We were desperate. She had everything. My mother let out a sound like she'd been punched. Real tears this time, not the theatrical ones I'd seen so many times before. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. Sienna, how could you do this? To your own child? To Maya? Evan stood up so fast his chair scraped backward. He looked at Sienna like he was seeing her for the first time. You lied to me, about our baby, about everything. You made me scream at my sister that she killed our kid. You made me threaten her. Sienna reached for him, sobbing, Evan, please, I just wanted us to have a better life. She wouldn't help. He recoiled. Don't touch me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice came out calm, almost quiet, but it cut through the room like glass. You invented a pregnancy. You faked a miscarriage. You made me believe, for weeks, that I had caused the death of an unborn child. You let the whole world call me a murderer. You turned my own family against me with a story you wrote in group chats. I looked at each of them in turn. My mother's horrified face, Evan's stunned silence, Sienna's crumbling facade. We're done, permanently. No second chances, no more contact ever. I turned off the projector, gathered my things, and walked to the door. At the threshold, I paused, just long enough to say one last thing. If any of you try to reach me again, calls, texts, showing up, going through other people, I will press every charge I can. Harassment, defamation, whatever it takes. Do not test me. I left. Behind me, the room erupted, shouting, accusations, sobs. Sienna's masterpiece of manipulation had finally collapsed under its own weight. The family she had so easily led by the nose now turned on her, on each other, on the illusion they had all helped sustain. I didn't look back. The apologies started almost immediately, late, desperate, and utterly meaningless to me. My mother left voicemails daily at first, then weekly. Long, trembling messages full of regret. I was blind, Maya. I believed her. I should have protected you. Please just let me explain. She sent letters, handwritten, filled with old memories she hoped would soften me. They went straight into the shredder. Evan texted once, "I'm divorcing her. I moved out. I'm so sorry for everything I said, everything I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know." Later, he sent proof of the filing papers. I read them, felt nothing, deleted the thread. Sienna posted a vague public apology, the kind that says, "I made mistakes in a dark time," without ever admitting the specifics. She started therapy, court-mandated, I heard through the grapevine. Whether it was real change or another performance, I didn't care. I didn't respond to any of it. Not a word, not a single emoji. I sent one final group email, short, formal, final. All contact ends here. Do not call, text, email, visit, or attempt to reach me through third parties. Any further attempts will be documented and reported under the existing restraining orders. This is permanent. Then I changed everything. New phone number, strictest privacy settings, new locks, again. I went through old photos on my phone and hard drive, childhood pictures, holidays, forced family smiles, and deleted them all. I kept only the memories that didn't hurt. I kept only the friends who had stood by me without question. At work, I channeled every ounce of leftover rage into my code. I took on the hardest projects. I mentored juniors. I stayed late without complaint. 18 months later, I was promoted to senior developer. The raise let me pay down the mortgage faster than planned. What once felt like a 25-year sentence shrank to something manageable, something I could finish on my terms. The apartment became more than walls. It became my fortress. One spare room turned into a proper home office, dual monitors, standing desk, shelves lined with books on algorithms and architecture. The other became a quiet library, soft armchair, floor lamp, stacks of novels I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. Mornings on the balcony became sacred, coffee in hand, city waking below me, silence I had earned with blood and years. There are still echoes sometimes, a random notification that reminds me of the old hate, a dream where I hear Evan screaming through the door, a fleeting thought of what my mother might look like now, alone with her guilt. But the echoes fade. What grows louder is the truth I finally own. I survived them. I protected what I built. I chose myself, without apology, without regret. This apartment isn't just a home anymore. It's my proof, my freedom, my victory. And no one will ever take it from me again.